Hello and welcome to part 2 to the series Breaking with Corruption from podcast 348. Let's look now at some advice about how to break with corruption.
And I'll reiterate it again, and I'm not saying this over and over because I think anybody out there is dumb. I think you're all absolutely brilliant. I think I'm fairly smart too, and it took me 2 years of therapy, so please, I apologize for any repetition that you might be experiencing in this. But I'm only saying it because I have to throw a whole lot of mud against the false self to get a spatter through to the true self. So I do apologize if you feel that you've heard this before, but you don't need to listen to it if you've already broken with your family. But if you're listening to this, I bet you haven't, and so you haven't got it yet. You haven't got it yet, and that's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. That's perfectly fine. It took me forever, and I'm not working with 2.5 brain cells here.
So if you haven't broken with your family yet, but you are listening to this podcast, that means you haven't got it yet. But that's okay. Stefan is going to explain everything to you, and he needs to repeat things a lot because otherwise he can't get through to your so-called true self.
You really do need to figure this out. This is absolutely essential. To find out if you have any scope, if you have any weight in this relationship at all. Absolutely crucial to figure this out. Do you have any scope or weight in this relationship in any way, shape, or form? Or is it simply the case that you are there for other people's convenience and basically as a big manhole cover to cover up the fires of hell called the past, right? Which nobody wants to touch because you're hot, baby. You're hot. And I would suspect the latter, but you can talk to your family and find out the former. Now, what happens after this particular process, and practice. Really important. Practice on the boards. I'd be happy to run through it on a call-in show with you. And if you want to call me, Skype me privately, we can do that too. I would ask that I be allowed to record it for other people's benefit. You can tell me that up front, and I may not do it if I can't record it because I'm not trying to be anyone's therapist. But if I can record it, this sort of role-playing, I'd be more than helpful. Or maybe Christina and I could role-play it for you, just so you really need to practice this kind of stuff because you're going to be in an emotionally volatile situation.
Okay, so here we see Stefan admitting that he's not a psychotherapist, but still, he hands all these instructions, all this guidance on how to deal with your family, how to break with your family, and he proposes that you practice with him or his wife Christina on the deFOOing process. Let's see a couple of predictions of how the interactions with your family will go according to Stefan.
And you're going to have a great difficulty holding on to your reason, because as you start to get passionate, you're going to start to get more angry, and as you start to get more angry, your family is going to start to close up and mock you and withdraw from you and call you crazy, and then you're not going to get anywhere, and then you're going to walk out feeling like you just got angry and they were reasonable, so you must have the problem. Like, all these defense mechanisms are going to occur for sure, and don't end up in that kind of situation, if you don't mind, right? I mean, just don't do it. So it would be bad for you. So practice is the key in this kind of situation, right? You're certainly probably not unaware of all the kind of defenses that go on in your family, so this is not going to be a completely unknown situation for you. But so let's just say you've gone through that process, and it's gone pretty much as I would expect, and as you probably anticipate, which is why you're afraid of doing it, and you've kind of got that your family doesn't give a rat's ass about you. That your family could fundamentally give two shits about you and your perspective. That you're simply there as a salve to their conscience, right? You're simply there as a way for them to say, hey, I must have been a good parent. Look, he keeps coming over for dinner, right? You're just there as one of these little hand puppets that the narcissist loves to pretend that they are themselves, that it's a purely voluntary and beautiful relationship, and that there's this hand puppet that they call their child who is there for their convenience to keep that myth alive, right? So you figured that out, right? Good for you. I'd give you a big hug if I could, but I'm kind of sweaty. But, big hug, all the love in the world raining down on you from the skies, because it's an absolutely miserable and for a short time debilitating place to be. But you will survive it. You will survive this revelation, because really, frankly, it's not a revelation. You knew this all along. Right? This is not something that is a shock.
So here we see that Stefan predicts that you'll find out that your family doesn't actually care about you if you talk to them, and that you're just a sock puppet for the bad conscience. He also says that deep inside you already know this and this isn't a shock to you. Still, this is very hard, of course, and so he gives all this warm emotional support for you for what you're going through right now. Next up, he advises certain books to read, Alice Miller and John Bradshaw, as well as writing a letter to break with your family.
So let's just say you're back and write it out in your journal, talk about it on the board, talk about it with well, I mean, I hate to say friends because I tell you they're probably all going to go as well, right? And it's probably not going to work out for you that well in terms of friendship either, but maybe you've got a new friend who you can talk about with this stuff. Keep a journal, write it down, read some books. Alice Miller stuff's very good. Some of the John Bradshaw stuff on family can be good. I mean, just put aside the religious stuff. But, really dig into this. It's going to be a bit of a lonely traverse, right? So then the question is, well, what next? Well, I'm a big fan of letters myself. I'm a big fan of mail. I don't like email because it's too quick for people to respond and they get all bitchy in email. But I'm a big fan of letters for this kind of stuff. So what I and other people I know have done, and these once you figure out that your family's not going to do anything beneficial to you or for you, well, they'll do a lot of stuff to you, but they won't do anything for you. Once you figure that out, then I think it's perfectly legitimate, as I've talked about briefly before, to send a letter and say, listen, guys, got to take a break from the family. I got some stuff to work out at a personal level. Family stuff I find is kind of painful.
So that's a short letter you can write saying you need a break from the family. Now let's look at the moral perspective he brings on all this.
But if you don't want to see them, and you're a good person, it's because they're bad people. Because most of the world is bad people. People? Right? I mean, the world isn't where it is because it's full of lightness and goodness. The bomb's raining down in Lebanon because the world is full of lightness and goodness. Thinking that your parents are moral is kind of like thinking that somebody in the Middle Ages can be an effective scientist. The knowledge does not exist yet. It is not propagated. We're trying to do our best here, but the knowledge is not out there yet.
So that's again a bit of repetition that parents simply don't have the moral knowledge nowadays to be a good person. And you are a good person because you're listening to FreedomainRadio and you are understanding morality, but your parents aren't, and that's why you need to break with them. To conclude, a snippet of his usual asking for money.
Kind of looking for new blood. I know we're getting a couple of hundred new listeners a month, so it's now time for you to pony up, I think, because if you've come this far, you must be getting a good deal of value, and I think what we have to offer here is quite unique. So do the right thing and spend some money. It will make it a lot easier for you to confront your parents if you're acting with integrity in your life in general.
So yeah, there we go. Even though Stefan says he's not a psychologist or a therapist, he already knows what the outcome is going to be for your conversation, because your parents are bad, corrupt, like all parents, pretty much all parents. And you already knew this, and the next thing to do is send a goodbye email to your parents, go to the boards and tell the Freedomainers what you've been going through. I hope this video sheds some light on the thought process of Stefan Molyneux, and I hope you'll join me in the final video, video 3, on the Breaking with Corruption series.